What happens when America's most beloved late-night host finally reaches his breaking point with the most controversial political figure of our time? The Tonight Show has witnessed its fair share of awkward interviews and celebrity meltdowns. But nothing could have prepared the audience for what happened the night Jimmy Fallon decided he'd had enough of Donald Trump's antics. That night, the easygoing comedian everyone knew transformed into something entirely different, a sharp-tongued warrior standing his ground against the former president in front of millions. The result? A verbal takedown so brutal that security eventually had to escort Trump off the set. The Tonight Show studio buzzed with its usual energy. The audience chattered excitedly, the band played a lively tune, and the iconic city skyline backdrop glowed under the studio lights. Behind his desk, Jimmy Fallon adjusted his tie, flashing his familiar grin at the camera. It was supposed to be just another night. Trump had been booked for what was meant to be a typical promotional interview. But from the instant the former president strode onto the stage, everyone could sense something was off. This wasn't going to be another light-hearted Fallon segment filled with laughter and games. The crowd clapped enthusiastically as Trump took his seat, that trademark smirk already planted firmly on his face. So Donald Jimmy began his voice, cheerful as ever. "Thanks for coming on the show tonight. You've been making quite a few headlines lately." Trump leaned back in the guest chair, spreading his arms wide. Jimmy, let me tell you, the headlines have been incredible. People are saying they've never seen coverage like this before. Everyone's talking about it. Tremendous attention." "Right," Jimmy said, his smile tightening just a little. "Well, I wanted to ask you about some of your recent statements. Don't you think some of your comments have been, a bit divisive?" The smirk on Trump's face widened. "Divisive, Jimmy? Come on, you know what's divisive. This show? I heard your ratings are terrible. Absolutely terrible. NBC's thinking of replacing you, right?" The crowd gave an uneasy laugh. A few glanced at one another, unsure if it was part of the act. Jimmy's smile wavered for a fraction of a second before returning. Though his eyes carried a spark the audience had rarely seen before. "Actually, Donald, our ratings are just fine," Jimmy replied, his voice still friendly but firmer now. "But let's talk about your ratings. How do you explain losing the popular vote twice?" The smile dropped from Trump's face instantly. "Excuse me, we're not here to talk about fake elections, Jimmy. We're here because you begged my team to have me on this failing show." "A failing show?" Jimmy echoed, raising his eyebrows. For the first time in years, the audience saw something different. Jimmy Fallon letting go of his nice guy persona. "Donald," he said, leaning forward slightly, "the only thing failing here is your ability to have a normal conversation without making everything about yourself." The studio went silent. Even the Roots, who had been quietly riffing in the background, exchanged stunned looks. Trump straightened in his seat, clearly thrown off by the unexpected resistance. "Listen here," Jimmy Trump said, jabbing a finger toward the host. "I've been on this show before and you were practically kissing my ring. You messed up my hair, remember? You were laughing, having a great time. What happened to that guy?" Jimmy clasped his hands together on the desk. "What happened to that guy?" "That guy grew a spine, Donald. That guy realized he was being used as a prop in your little publicity circus." Gasps rippled through the audience. Trump's face reddened, his jaw tightening. "Used as a prop? I made it your career, Jimmy. Before I came on this show, nobody even knew who you were. You were just some washed-up SNL guy." "Oh, that's rich coming from you, Jimmy," shot back, his voice rising. "A reality TV star who somehow convinced people he could run a country. At least when I was on SNL, I was actually funny." Trump slammed his hand on the desk, rattling Jimmy's coffee mug. "How dare you talk to me like that? Do you know who I am?" "Yeah, Donald, I know exactly who you are," Jimmy said, standing up from behind his desk. "You're a man who can't handle being challenged. You throw tantrums whenever people don't bow down to you. And right now, you're sitting in my chair, acting like you own the place." The crowd was frozen eyes darting between the two men. Some began recording on their phones. The cameras kept rolling. Trump rose to his feet too, his face turning a deeper shade of red. "Your chair. This whole network should be thanking me for being here. Without me, you people would have nothing to talk about." "Nothing to talk about," Jimmy laughed. But it wasn't his warm, friendly laugh. It was sharp cold. Donald comedy existed long before you, and it'll exist long after you're gone. The difference is, We won't have to worry about our jokes starting international incidents. That's it, Trump said, pointing straight at him. I'm done with this. You're treating me with total disrespect. Nobody talks to me like this. Well then, Jimmy said, crossing his arms, maybe it's about time someone did. The air was thick with tension. Trump's face shifted from red to almost purple, his fists clenching at his sides. The audience sat motionless, witnessing a side of Jimmy Fallon they'd never imagined. Maybe it's about time someone did what Jimmy Trump growled, his voice low and dangerous. You think you can embarrass me on television? You think this little crowd cares what you say? Jimmy turned to his audience, then back at Trump, a sly grin spreading across his face. Let's find out, shall we? He looked toward the crowd. How many of you came here tonight hoping to see me roast this guy? The room exploded with cheers. Applause thundered through the studio. People were on their feet, waving and shouting. The energy was electric. Trump's eyes widened, panic flickering behind his scowl. Sit down, he barked. Sit down, right now. Oh, now you're giving orders to my audience, Jimmy said, stepping out from behind his desk. These people didn't come here to be lectured by you, Donald. They came here to be entertained. And honestly, watching you melt down is the best entertainment I've given them all month. Trump pointed a shaking finger inches from Jimmy's face. You're making the biggest mistake of your career right now. I can destroy you with one phone call. Jimmy didn't flinch. Calmly, he reached up and nudged Trump's hand away. One phone call to who, Donald? Your Twitter account got banned. Remember, your social media platform's a joke, and half your old staff won't even take your calls. The audience gasped audibly. Trump's mouth opened, then closed again, searching for words. You can't talk to me like this, he stammered. I'm Donald Trump. Yeah, Jimmy said, spreading his arms. And I'm Jimmy Fallon. This is my show, my studio, my audience. And right now, you're acting like a spoiled kid who didn't get the toy he wanted. Trump's chest heaved as he glared at Jimmy, his voice trembling with fury. I built an empire. I was the president. You're just a comedian. Just a comedian, Jimmy shot back, his voice rising. Donald, comedians have been calling out powerful men like you for centuries. We're the ones who tell the truth when everyone else is too afraid. And right now, you're standing here completely exposed. The audience burst into laughter and cheers. Phones were raised everywhere, recording every second. Trump turned toward the crowd, shouting, You people don't know what you're laughing at. This man's disrespecting a former president. Former being the key word there, Jimmy said smoothly. And respect Donald, that's earned, not demanded. Trump's jaw dropped. He opened his mouth ready to fire back, but Jimmy was already moving closer, his tone sharper than ever. You walk into every room expecting people to bow to you. That might have worked in the White House, but it doesn't work here. Trump's face twisted with rage. I did more in 4 years than any president in history, he shouted, his voice cracking slightly. Really, Jimmy said, picking up a stack of cards from his desk, because I've got some numbers here that might surprise you. Should we go over them? Trump froze, suspicion flashing across his face. Those are fake numbers. Fake news. These are your administration's own reports, Donald, Jimmy said, flipping through the cards. Would you like to talk about approval ratings, job growth, maybe the number of people from your own team who've called you unfit for office? Trump slammed his fist down again. They're traitors. All of them jealous because they couldn't handle working for a winner. Jimmy looked into the camera, his voice calm. Folks, this is what narcissistic rage looks like in real time. When someone like this gets confronted with facts, they explode. They blame everyone else. They lose control. Trump spun toward the camera, shouting, Turn that off. Turn the cameras off right now. The cameras stay on, Donald, Jimmy said evenly. This is live television, and America deserves to see who you really are when no one's kissing your ring. Trump turned back to him, seething. I'm warning you, Jimmy. Stop this right now, or you'll regret it for the rest of your pathetic career. Jimmy smiled, unbothered. Pathetic career, Donald. I've been hosting this show for over a decade. I've interviewed presidents, movie stars, athletes. All of them managed to answer real questions without throwing a tantrum. I don't throw tantrums, Trump shouted, proving Jimmy's point. Instantly. Jimmy tilted his head. No, of course not. This is perfectly normal behavior for a grown man. The crowd erupted with laughter again. Jimmy stood firm, his calm composure only fueling Trump's unraveling. The night that began as a routine interview had turned into one of the most explosive moments in late-night history, and they were only halfway through. Trump stood there breathing heavily, his face flushed with anger, as the laughter from the audience rolled over him. His hands trembled slightly, the tension visible in every stiff movement. Jimmy remained perfectly still, watching him calmly from behind the desk. The contrast between the two men, striking one, unraveling the other, completely in control. Trump finally managed to speak, his voice shaking. "You think you can embarrass me, Jimmy? You think your little jokes are going to hurt me? I've faced world leaders tougher than you." Jimmy tilted his head, his expression a mix of disbelief and amusement. "World leaders? You mean the ones who laughed at you during your speeches? I remember that clip. It went viral. Even the UN couldn't keep a straight face." The audience laughed again, louder this time, and Trump's lips pressed into a thin line. "Fake news," he muttered almost to himself, but the microphones caught it. "Oh right," Jimmy said, his tone playful but laced with steel. "That's your answer to everything, isn't it? Fake news rigged system witch hunt. You've got more catchphrases than I do." Trump pointed a finger at him again. "This is an ambush. You set me up?" "An ambush," Jimmy echoed. "Donald, it's a talk show. The only thing I ambush people with is questions and good lighting." He stepped out from behind the desk again, slowly closing the distance between them. "But if you think asking about your own words is a setup, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." Trump's breathing grew heavier. "You don't understand what you're doing right now," he said. "You're attacking a former president of the United States." Former Jimmy repeated, nodding. "You keep skipping over that word like it doesn't exist. You're not the president anymore, Donald. You're just another guest on my show. And right now, you're not even a very entertaining one." The crowd roared again. Some people were standing phones up recording what was sure to become one of the most rewatched moments in late-night television history. Trump's mouth opened and closed again as if he couldn't decide whether to shout or walk out. Finally, he managed, You can't talk to me like that. I've built more success in my life than you could ever dream of." Jimmy chuckled softly. "Success? You mean the bankrupt casinos, the failed university, the steaks that nobody bought, Donald, if that's your definition of success. I'll stick with comedy." The audience burst into laughter again, and even some of the crew members couldn't help but grin. The energy in the room had shifted entirely. The crowd was no longer nervous. They were on Jimmy's side now. Trump's voice cracked as he yelled, "I've built an empire. I've got buildings with my name on them all over the world." And yet, Jimmy said smoothly, "You still need to come on my show for attention." The laughter came in waves. Trump's jaw tightened as he pointed toward the door. "I don't have to stay here and take this. This is over." "You sure you want to do that?" Jimmy asked, still calm. "Because walking away every time things get uncomfortable might just confirm what people already think about you." Trump froze mid-step, slowly turning back toward him. "What did you just say?" I said. Jimmy continued, "Evenly running away whenever you're challenged is kind of your thing, isn't it? Whether it's debates, investigations, or interviews, you always leave before you have to answer for something." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Trump's eyes narrowed, his lips trembling as he tried to form a response. "You don't know what you're talking about," he finally growled. "Don't I?" Jimmy asked. "Let me guess, the last person who told you the truth doesn't work for you anymore. Because that's what you do, right? You fire insult or sue anyone who dares to disagree with you." "That's not true," Trump shouted. "I hear criticism all the time. The fake news media never stops." Jimmy leaned on his desk, shaking his head. "That's not criticism, Donald. That's reporting. Real criticism comes from people who care enough to tell you when you're wrong. When's the last time someone close to you disagreed with you and you actually listened?" Trump hesitated. For just a moment, something flickered behind his eyes, a flash of vulnerability, almost human, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. His voice hardened again. "I don't have to answer that. This interview is over." He turned to leave, but Jimmy's voice followed him. "Of course it is, because when things get tough, that's your move, walk away. That's the Trump method, deny, deflect, and disappear." Trump spun around, his expression furious. "I'm not walking away because I'm scared. I'm walking away because I don't waste my time with losers." "Losers," Jimmy said, laughing. Donald, my show's been #1 in late night for years. I've won awards. I've hosted the Golden Globes. I don't need to tear other people down to feel important. Trump sneered. Your audience doesn't even like you. Half of them are bots, just like your online followers. Jimmy raised an eyebrow. Bots. That's funny coming from the guy who literally bought fake engagement on social media. Remember that little investigation? Trump's face turned bright red. That's a lie, he shouted. Sure, Jimmy said. Just like everything else that doesn't fit your version of reality. The audience cheered again. By now, the energy in the room was feverish. Every line from Jimmy landed like a punch, and Trump's defenses were crumbling faster than anyone could have imagined. You're making a huge mistake, Trump barked, pointing at him again. You'll regret this, Fallon. You and this network. I can have your job by next week. Jimmy smirked. Oh, please. The last time you tried to run something, it ended in bankruptcy court. The audience exploded. Trump lunged forward, shouting, That's enough. That's enough. His hands shot out as if to grab Jimmy, but the host sidestepped effortlessly. Trump stumbled forward, barely catching himself on the edge of the desk. Within seconds, 2 large security guards appeared on stage, moving swiftly but calmly toward the commotion. Jimmy straightened his tie, completely composed. Gentlemen, he said, his tone measured. I think Mr. Trump is ready to leave now. Don't touch me, Trump shouted, his voice cracking. I can walk out on my own. This is assault. No, Donald, Jimmy said, following him toward the exit, his tone low but steady. This is what consequences look like, something you're clearly not used to. The audience went wild, chanting Jimmy's name. Trump kept yelling as the guards gently but firmly guided him off the stage. You'll pay for this. I'll sue you. I'll sue NBC. I'll sue everyone in this building, Jimmy called after him. Good luck with that. Maybe you can get the same lawyers who handled your election fraud cases. That line brought the house down. The crowd erupted into cheers so loud they nearly drowned out Trump's voice as he disappeared behind the curtain. Jimmy turned back toward his desk, lifted his coffee mug, and took a long, deliberate sip. When the applause finally began to die down, he set the mug down, adjusted his jacket, and looked directly into the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, a faint smile on his lips, I believe that's what they call taking out the trash. The audience rose to their feet, giving him a standing ovation that went on for nearly 2 minutes. The band joined in with a triumphant riff, the studio lights gleaming off the crowd's raised hands and cheering faces. When things finally settled, Jimmy leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. Well, folks, he said, I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Definitely not what we planned, but hey, sometimes the best television happens when you least expect it. He paused, glancing toward the empty guest chair where Trump had been sitting just minutes ago. I guess tonight was one of those nights. He turned back to the camera, his smile widening again. Make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what you thought of tonight's little conversation. Should more talk show hosts stand up to their guests when they cross the line? Or should we just stick to softball questions and fake laughs? He leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. Honestly, after tonight, I'm not sure I can go back to the old way of doing things. The audience cheered one final time as the closing music began to play, the lights dimming around the desk. What had started as a simple interview had become something unforgettable. The night Jimmy Fallon finally stopped playing nice. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, the energy in the studio still buzzed like electricity. The audience members were slow to leave, chattering excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. Some couldn't believe it had really happened, that Trump had lost his temper on live television, that Jimmy had stood his ground so fiercely. People were already pulling out their phones, replaying clips, sending them to friends, tweeting quotes, before the episode had even been uploaded officially. Jimmy stayed seated at his desk for a long moment, the applause still echoing faintly in his ears. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, his hands resting flat on the cool wood surface. The band members exchanged glances, unsure whether to say something or just let the silence settle. Finally, one of the producers approached headset, slightly crooked voice, cautious. Jimmy, are you okay? He looked up, gave a small smile, and nodded. Yeah, I'm fine, but he didn't really feel fine. Beneath the satisfaction of standing up to someone who had bulldozed his way through countless interviews before there was something heavier, a kind of disbelief at what had just unfolded. That was, the producer began searching for the right word. Crazy Jimmy offered, Historic, the producer said instead. The internet's going to blow up in 10 minutes. Jimmy chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. Well, I guess that's good for ratings. She hesitated. You sure you're ready for what comes next? He shrugged. Honestly, not really, but I think we crossed a line tonight, the one where comedy meets truth. Once you go there, there's no going back. Meanwhile, backstage chaos reigned. Trump's team was in a frenzy, shouting into phones, demanding statements, drafting tweets that would defend him and attack Jimmy NBC and anyone else who'd had the nerve to laugh. Trump himself paced furiously in the dressing room, his reflection glaring back at him from the mirror. His face was still red, his tie askew, his voice hoarse from yelling. He humiliated me, he kept muttering. On live television, they'll pay for this. An aide tried to calm him down. Sir, we can spin this. You came off strong assertive. Trump turned sharply. Strong, I looked like a fool out there. Do you think people are laughing with me or at me? The aide stayed silent. Trump glared at him before storming toward the door. Get me my phone. I'm tweeting. Minutes later, the first message went out. The Fallon show is fake news. Totally unfair treatment. I was ambushed. Disgusting behavior by NBC SAD. The next one followed. Ratings will tank after tonight. Nobody wants to watch a clown like Jimmy Fallon. Pathetic. But instead of support, the replies were merciless. Clips of Jimmy's one-liners spread like wildfire. Taking out the trash became a trending phrase. Memes appeared within minutes, Trump's red-faced expression photoshopped onto movie posters. Quotes from the show turned into captions. Trump meltdown was trending #1 by midnight. Jimmy's phone buzzed endlessly with notifications, texts from friends, fellow comedians, even politicians. Some congratulated him, some warned him, but most just said the same thing. You did what everyone's wanted to do for years. By the next morning, every news outlet was running the story. Headlines like Fallon stands, tall Trump. Storms off live show, late night turns, real Jimmy Fallon draws the line. TV history, when a talk show became a showdown. Clips replayed on every channel. Analysis panels debated whether Jimmy had gone too far or simply done what needed to be done. The episode's YouTube upload shattered records, tens of millions of views in just hours. NBC executives called Jimmy early in the morning. We need to talk about last night, one of them said, over speakerphone. Let me guess, Jimmy replied. You're worried about backlash. We're worried about everything, the executive admitted. Legal threats, political pressure, advertiser reactions. You name it. Trump's already talking about lawsuits. Jimmy sighed. He threatens to sue everyone. He won't follow through. There was a pause. Still, we might need to release an official statement. Fine, Jimmy said. Say whatever you have to. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. When he arrived at the studio later that day, reporters were waiting outside. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved toward him. Jimmy, did you plan that confrontation? Do you think you went too far? Are you afraid of retaliation? He smiled politely, but didn't answer much, just said, last night was real. That's all. Inside, the staff greeted him like a hero. Applause echoed through the hallway as he walked in. Even the usually stoic cameramen gave him nods of respect. That night, during the next episode's monologue, Jimmy addressed it head-on. The crowd was packed, tickets had sold out instantly, so he began a grin tugging at his lips. Apparently I made some news last night. The audience laughed and cheered. I just want to say, it wasn't planned. I didn't expect things to go that way, but sometimes, when a guest crosses the line, you've got two choices. You either laugh it off, or you stand up. He paused, looking straight into the camera. And last night, I stood up. Thunderous applause filled the room. He continued, we live in a time where people can lie on camera, bully others, and walk away without ever being challenged. I guess I just decided not to let that happen on my stage. The audience rose to their feet again. Jimmy looked around the studio, almost overwhelmed. This isn't about politics. It's about decency. You can be powerful, famous, or rich, but that doesn't mean you get to treat people like garbage. Not here. By the end of the show, something had shifted. Jimmy had always been known as the nice guy of late-night TV, lighthearted, easygoing, never confrontational. But now people saw him differently. Stronger, sharper, unafraid. Back in his dressing room, as the studio lights dimmed and the crowd filtered out, he finally let out a deep sigh. The day had felt like a lifetime. He sat down, loosened his tie, and stared at his reflection. For a moment, he thought about Trump somewhere out there, still fuming, surrounded by people who would never tell him the truth. Then he thought about his audience, the messages from viewers who said, "Thank you for standing up." He smiled faintly. Maybe it had all been worth it. The next morning, the world had already moved on to the next headline, but the clip remained one of the most watched moments in late-night history. Years later, people would still talk about it the night Jimmy Fallon stopped laughing and told the truth. And though he never said it out loud deep down, he knew that moment had changed everything for his career, for television, and for himself. Because sometimes the funniest thing you can do is stop pretending that everything's a joke.